Hi, my name is Shannon Maguire. My book is Furl Parachute. The book started sort of as a creative response to Wulf and Eadwacer, which is a 19-line fragment that sits in the Exeter manuscript between the riddles and the elegies, and is one of these mystery poems. People have all sorts of theories about how many characters there are, how they all relate to each other. One of the things that I loved about and was attracted to about the poem, beyond the fact that it's one of the very few poems that is written from a female perspective grammatically, is the fact that, to me, it seemed very metatextual in that it seemed to be playing with its ambiguity. It seemed to be playing with language and the idea of that the poets at the time had of the idea of shaping language, because there is no one way of reading it. And so I thought, well, this is a great generative engine and also will be very fun. And also it had a bunch of gravity to it as well. And that comes in through the elegy. So the loss that is part of this is Ura in the middle of the line, I think, that's built in structurally to all Old English poems, was thematized in this one and just echoed in ways that really haunted me. And I started to dream about it, actually, which when that happens, I know I'm like, oh, okay, I'm doomed. I have to write about this. And so I started with 10 poems, and it was for a final project for an undergrad English class. And then I just kept going. Anglo-Saxon or Old English was not a prestige language. It was a vulgar language, which I really liked. It was a language of the people, wasn't a language of commerce or a language of administration. That was Latin. And so what I really liked to begin with was the fact that it was a minor language. That was one of the things. The fact that the poem itself was written from a woman's point of view or a feminine point of view, you can tell, like in the actual grammar, was another thing that really drew me and to the language. And as I started to play and find ways of translating and ways of slanting different readings of it, which is possible because of the parataxis and because it's very ambiguous about even if there are 4 characters the way I read, or whether they're 3, or what the relationship is between them. So as I started to play with the different possibilities in the poem, I realized as well that there was something really strangely contemporary about it, and especially because for me, I was writing most of it in the summer of 2010. So BP oil spill was one kind of bookend. And then there was like the G8, G20 summit in Toronto, which is another one. And the language that was coming out of that and the images that were coming out of that. And the fact that now English is the language of business and has a strange prestige. I thought maybe jarring the two things together could enact some of the gap poetry and poetics that the original text seemed to be doing to me when I was reading it. And in there, I realized, well, there are other stages that the English language went through. So I chose the first stanza, basically, of the Pearl poem, which was a Middle English poem. This is like kind of comes before early modern usage, and so if you think of Chaucer or whatever, that's kind of, so there was this Pearl poem that I used a little fragment of as well, just to try to see what would happen if I tried to fill the gap and make new ones. And then, of course, I was like, well, you can't talk about the English language and its different changes without bringing some Shakespeare in, so I had to steal some Shakespeare and revamp that as well. And then it just turned into this large project and the first draft was spiraling and it was huge and expansive. And I showed it to Erin Murray, who I was working with, and she's like, what is this? Like, no, you know, take it back. So then the strategy to start with was to actually got 3 friends to circle language that was compelling to them so it could bring me back to sort of where the gaps were, what I could play with. And then I started to structure it around a grammar just to keep me a little bit focused and contained. And that seemed to work really, really well. So I got my politics in there, and I got the kind of, I don't know, I'm a conceptual poet, but I really also, I mean, and of course, you know, lyric poetry, the song, all poetry is song. I think I'm stealing that from someone. Anyways, but I got all of that in sort of in the kind of spill. So I allowed myself to collage different forms of the English language to try to break open meanings, and it was fun. So when I started, I mean, one of the things about choosing an Old English poem is that there are some familiarity is there, but they're not. There's also a weird ghosting that happens, so that you think you know a word and then it turns out you don't, or you think you don't know a word and then you realize that you do. And so as I was reading the poem and trying to figure out, okay, what is like if I were a scholar, what would this poem say? And how does the language actually work in it? And then as a poet, what do I see in it? So I think part of my poetics of translation actually comes from looking at my mom's visual practice. And part of what I see in her visual practice is that she will take a line through a number of permutations and arrive somewhere completely different. And she has multiple horizons going on in her work often. And so I use this as a structuring way. So I saw the language very visually as well. So if images came up because I was looking at a word or its relation to another word in another line, which is how you have to read the grammar, I would get something new, something would break open, and then I would go with that offshoot, maybe in another poem or whatever. So that's my bizarre way of translating. I actually see this project as working on contemporary English. And I think I see parallels between science and Latin, like the language of mathematics and science in our contemporary world, and Latin, even though, I mean, you can't say that science and math are languages of administration, but in a way they kind of are. They're languages of the economy and also languages of the master narrative and dominant discourse, and the way that we actually categorize our world and then instrumentalize it. So I thought that within my poem, I would also want to react to these technical languages as well. And the reason that I chose not diagrams is because I needed something to relate to the way that the worldview of Old English poets, which like if you look at the manuscripts and that sort of thing, they'll have a lot of knots in them, partly because their idea of fate had to do with language. And so the fact that the Shope, the Old English poet, is a Shope, and that is basically a word derived from shaper, that sort of thing. I thought, okay, well, I can work in a contemporary way with knots, and then you get the crossings, and knot theory is all about crossings. So I was reading these texts, these mathematical like textbooks on like how you figure out a 6 crossing knot or whatever. And the language then just of the textbook became evocative, but also what it was saying about the spaces and the way that you can conceptualize the universe just through surfaces and that sort of thing. And so I did there's a poem there where I design what you call machines. So those are my procedural poetics. So I designed a machine based on a macrame kind of like a hanger for a snowflake. And it was this long unwieldy poem. And then I was like, well, what would happen if it was a moth-eaten thing? And then what if I only put what the moth ate onto the page? So things like that, and things that the reader will, that are just for me, that were fun and that were a way to respond to to the language and to the my desire to kind of eat through contemporary language and see what happens. And so there's your organic stuff too. I hope that they will be inspired to play with language and to play with ambiguity and to play with what you can do on the page, in a visual as well as a sonic way. Snowflake hanger, macrame. Cupboard falling through her fingers. A white phosphorus wolf spreading through the streets. Return the wound of flight, language. Return the copyists, librarians, and midwives. Return with the intuition to lighthouse. And this is the very first one, the closest you will get to the actual Old English translation that I did, or translation from the Old English. To my people, she is as a sacrificial gift. They desire to serve her if she comes in a host. Different are we. Wulf is on one island, I on another. Is that fen surrounded? Is that island secure? Slaughter cruel men on the island want to serve her if she comes in a host. Different we are. My wolf, when it was rainy and I tearfully lamenting my far-wandering hopes' bad weather, I was nevertheless also hostile. When the warrior encompassed limb, too much pleasure for me. Wolf, my wolf, I your hopes cause to be sick. Your infrequent visits care not at all about the lack of food for the spirit. Do you hear us together, Eadwacer? Lead Wulf to the wood, my poor wretched cub, that my people easily tear apart. We two that never united in speech together. Do you hear, Eadwacer? It's not at all a lack of food that makes us sick, but expectations that all tear together what never united. A slaughter-cruel husband and I encompassed in her limb. Wulf is my far-wandering warrior. We are different. When you swam, lifted your head out of the waves, lean question mark, body begging an answer, I filled you up with onion stew, and you pulled the root from my tongue. Kiss me quick, I am your she-wolf, your word, your fate. I hear not one kindling of your voice. Was it of reeds or of spears? Near to the hour of dawn a stranger, unfamiliar flowers. She might have been named Sylvia or Buttons or Applied Computing, Astrolabe. And near to her the split of daisy bombs, 53 reviews of recent accidents, and a book of hours of detonations at the crossings. A small log with names encumbering just beyond, the airstream, planes landing amidst, various species of poetical replies to pressures. Often I have waited watching that well, before the spot where my hands spent careful cold stirring hours, where I fell upon the flurry flat, for she haunted the spot, my daughter. So small, so smooth her three sides were, so round I judged her gems' gay eyes, alas, I lessened her, left her everywhere. So round I judged, so small, so smooth, alas, I lost her there. Progressed to the ground, away from me she got, all of her blood there sprag in space, a sprite in the ground, a bloodied place. The soil my body and insown birth, all hollers and echoes and chokes. Dubbed wren she rest, progressed to the ground, away from me she got, her blood there sprig, so small, so smooth, so round. Swallow love. A lone wolf is minus a pack, her bags all hollers and echoes, stuffing everything possible and impossible into one mouthful of howl. A weightless fall, a body floats up towards the page as our double image sinks into the bog eyes of the stalker. Was there a place where the woods were thick enough we should have waited to discover? Maybe we be'd there just now, wispy and light as shadow thieves. You whispered, wolf, you bride. Language was gravity, a charge exchange of lines. We searched for enemies in sheep's tongue, heard what couldn't be herded, switched from gazelle to carnivore in turn. We an interrupted carnival, wheels leaving the celebrants high up where we might drown, in the throat of night, in the spit of earth, in some shallow swallow of the moon. Think how we leap, au lieu. I send vowel wolves, lick up the ink, so rows and rows swollen with rain, into all I am your sorrow. Spell elps, split lips, all I am slips. Type is space getting back at time. Petruchio. Come, let me have a bigger. Kate. I'll have no bigger. Petruchio. When you are gentle, you shall have one too. Kate. Love me or love me not, I will have. Petruchio. What masking stuff is here? Watch her. Aside, witch. Up and down, carved like an apple tart. Snip and nip and cut and slit and slash. Petruchio. All is done in reverend care, till she stoop, watch her. Aside, pet. She never looks upon her lure. Petruchio. As with the meat, the coverlet. Aside, pet. This is a way to kill my falcon. Aside, both. Thus have I politically begun the making of a bed.